Thank you for being with us and taking our questions. And let us start our conversation with these three main focuses that I have also briefly identified in my short review. And let us start with the recent support program for MSMEs in Georgia. 6,000 micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises have the chance to become part of World Bank's initiative. A very important one. So let us explain what is the general approach of World Bank towards MSME sector in Georgia, why this focus in the first place. And when we said that you would be here, businesses started also asking questions, and they are interested in such details as who will be these 6,000 MSMEs? Do new ones have also the opportunity to enter the competition and also be part of this initiative? Thank you.
So Elena, to begin with, thank you so much for having me on your show again. It's a true pleasure to be here. I can only agree with what my colleagues from the ADB, EBRD, and IMF has says that SMEs, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises really are critical for both the jobs agenda as well as the economic growth agenda as well. And in many ways, I believe that the pace of the post-COVID recovery will very much depend on the ability of firms to grow moving forward and pivot away from a very difficult time to a more prosperous future. So the big question now is, how do you achieve this? How do you get firms to grow, to create the economic growth and the job opportunities moving forward? And at the World Bank, we've actually conducted quite a bit of research on this particular topic. And essentially what we found are 5 key drivers. Number one, very important for countries to avoid size-dependent policies, for example, tax incentives. France, Japan have tried this and have found that it actually serves as a disincentive to grow, because firms only grow to a certain point and then stop growing. Second, having a strong enabling environment. Here, Georgia ranks 7th globally in the Doing Business Index, and we believe that has a very strong enabling environment. And then there are 3 critical factors that are so important to help them grow. One is access to markets, where I think Georgia is well positioned given the Free Trade Association and agreements that it has in place with Europe and in other countries as well. But there are 2 that I think our project addresses and that need to be built upon. One is access to finance, and 2 is access or better skills. And let me then pivot to the new project that you just spoke about. It's an $85 million support project for micro and small and medium-sized enterprises called the Georgia Relief and Recovery Project. And essentially this project has a short and a more medium-term focus. On the short term, we want to help small and medium-sized enterprises that are hurting from the pandemic.
To survive in the first place.
Absolutely. Not zombie firms, not those firms that would have maybe have gone bankrupt anyways, but those firms that are suffering through no fault of their own because of some of the lockdowns and the restrictions that were implemented. Here, we essentially have 3 components to provide this short-term relief to these firms. Number one, we have a grants program for micro enterprises. Number 2, we help with the co-financing of interest rate payments for smaller and medium-sized enterprises. And then number 3, we are working with the current partial credit guarantee scheme that exists here in Georgia, which we're also helping to improve and to strengthen to make sure that more medium and larger enterprises can benefit. And very importantly, something that I'm almost proudest of is technical assistance and advisory service that we will be providing to firms to help them not only COVID-proof, but also to digitize their operations, both addressing their ability to adopt e-commerce platforms to provide better service delivery to people during the pandemic, but also to strengthen them for the long term, to make them more competitive. Those are the short-term areas. Over the more medium and the long-term areas, Elena, we actually, and I'm very, very happy about this, are working with the National Bank of Georgia to strengthen the instant payment systems. We're also modernizing the secure transaction and collateral registry framework. And then finally, we're also working with the Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development with respect to digital verification identity, or eKYC, which is critical for types of transactions over, again, the long term. So all of this taken together, the short and the medium term solutions are going to have a major impact on businesses here in Georgia moving forward. And I would very much like to thank Enterprise Georgia that's going to be implementing the grants and the co-financing program And all companies or enterprises that are interested in applying, as you had asked, should direct their attention towards enterprise.
So it's open for everybody?
It is open, and the criteria are very clearly spelled out. And as you see, you have different modalities for different firm sizes. I would encourage all firms to go to the website, and I think you'll find all the information. Right.
Great, and we'll follow up on that as well. Now, let us focus on the second direction as well, and that's green initiative and green economy. Here, I read the report, which has numbers in it, and it's very important when we're talking about green economy, and it's a relatively new term, so to say. And this report has some really big numbers in it. In 2018, air pollution in Georgia contributed to more than 4,000 lives lost, while its economic costs were estimated at 560 million USD, or 3% of GDP. And also, it was very interesting to find out that cost of agricultural and forest land degradation, which disproportionately impacts the rural poor who derive their livelihoods from land, was estimated at 128 million USD, and restoring these landscapes could reduce the poverty gap by 6%. These are really big numbers. What is the specific? What are some specific initiatives here, and what is World Bank's approach to supporting green economy in Georgia?
So thank you to begin with for citing this World Bank report, and again, think of it. 3% of GDP. Think of the lost benefits that you accrue from, again, air pollution that exists. And also the number, 4,000 people have indirectly or directly passed away due to air pollution. 4,000, that is roughly the number of people, by the way, that have passed from COVID, which is about at 4,500 according to the latest number. So I would hope that we can treat this issue of pollution, climate change, a just green transition with the same sense of urgency as we are currently treating the COVID crisis moving forward. Yes, we need to clearly address the COVID crisis first. That is a short-term priority. But, and this is something that we at the World Bank and many other institutions are saying, it would be such a pity, Elena, if we were to build back to where we were before. Let us use this crisis to build back better, to move forward, to build something new. Digital is certainly something that's going to be important, and I'm happy to touch upon that
of
further.
course.
We have an exciting
That's my
Log in
next
Georgian
question.
project. But there is also this opportunity to build back in a sustainable way. And that is where the green transition, I think, takes place. And look, tourism is one of the key economic areas of Georgia. One of the reasons why the tourists come here is because of Georgia's natural beauty, one of its main assets. So I think it's incumbent on this administration, government, but really the people at large to really protect this very natural asset that it has and this comparative advantage that it has over many other people. So putting the right policies in place is going to be critical. Now the good news is that Georgia already has an enabling legal and regulatory framework that by and large is in place and actually meets very good practices. So issues, legal principles like polluter pays or energy efficiency laws are in fact already there and present.
But is Georgia ready for this? Because in my conversations with other IFIs as well, we see these problems, right? With, for example, HPPs, where we see that almost all big or small HPPs are on hold, and is Georgia ready for that?
So look, I think that there's a supply and a demand side element. So some of the investments that are needed, certainly given some of the fiscal challenges that we have right now, may not be possible at this particular point in time. Take energy efficiency as one example. To retrofit all the school buildings, hospital, public buildings, I think is absolutely critical, but those are immense costs and will take some time to implement. So this is certainly. On the other hand, I think that every single one of us has a very important role that we can play here to look at the demand side, consuming a little bit less energy, polluting less. I think these are all things that every Georgian can easily do, and that will actually help, even if it's only a small contribution, but will help address the climate change and the green transition. And in the meantime, once the pandemic is over, once the economy recovers, together with government, we can then help to rebuild, some of these, energy and transitions.
Okay, so it's more refocusing at this time and
say
thinking of green economy culture.
It's to prioritize what's important, and to my mind, we need over the short term to focus on vaccine rollout, getting over the COVID-19 pandemic. But again, let us not go back to the old. Let us use this opportunity to go to the new. Let us have a digital and a green Georgia movement.
Yes, you mentioned digital several times, and that's actually my favorite program that World Bank is supporting, and that's 40 million USD, and that's a Login Georgia project. And we saw a presentation in Guria. We also heard that now Kobuleti will be the second pilot project. So what are some news here, and we would like to hear some updates.
So thank you. I share your passion for this topic. So look, I think that the benefits of the digital economy have always been evident, and there are lots of studies and research that show the benefits that can accrue to an economy. But I think this COVID-19 crisis has really brought this to the forefront. Number one, we see that firms that have moved to online sales have actually seen the smallest reduction of sales. We see that households that have moved to digital and online services were still able to purchase and survive a little bit easier because they could interact digitally without having to go out. And finally, we saw that government as well was able to and continue to provide core services to the population because it had the ability to reach people in remote areas digitally. So I think here we see this. And thank you for raising the Login Georgia project. This is a project that, again, I'm really, really excited about and I think can be transformative for this country. So we aim to connect 500,000 people in rural Georgia, spread out over 1,000 mountainous and rural villages, and provide them with reliable, affordable, secure internet broadband access.
This might have helped the vaccination program as well because the registration was mainly online, and this could have helped this process as well. So my last question in this part, and then we will have to go to the advertisement, but I would like to ask you, are you, and my question is very simple, are you satisfied with the vaccination pace in Georgia? Because we all agree probably that without vaccination, it will be really hard to achieve any of these goals that we have been mentioning here.
You're right, it's a simple question. It's a little bit complex to answer. But let me try. So Georgia today has administered about 90,000 doses. And if I'm not mistaken, just under 15,000 people have received 2 doses and so have been fully vaccinated. That's under 1% of the population that has been fully vaccinated. So with that in mind, of course, under 1%, I don't think anyone could be happy with the pace of the vaccination. Right now,
especially with the ambition goal to vaccinate 60% of population by 2021.
About 1 or 2 weeks ago, we were just at 1,000 vaccinations per day. Now we're at about 2,800. If we continue this current pace, it'll take about 4.3 years to vaccinate 60% of the population, or the eligible population, right? Now, that's clearly more needs to be done. But with that said, I also want to say, and this is where it gets complex, it's difficult to secure vaccines right now in a global market. We see how challenging many countries across the world, the challenges that they face in securing vaccines. And I can tell you this government, because I'm supporting them, or the World Bank is supporting them, is working really hard to secure additional vaccines. And we do believe that there's some good news that will be coming very soon in this respect.
But we have always been concentrating also on the information campaign that to us wasn't sufficient and wasn't bringing like proactive, trustworthy information to the population, because we know how that this information is working against vaccines and against vaccination process.
Let me pick up, it's a very important point that you mentioned, this issue of vaccine hesitancy. And we know that there's still large parts of the population, in particular in rural Georgia, who still have a large degree of vaccine hesitancy. And here, I just want to reiterate, it is really so critical that people get vaccinated. I think, vaccines are not new. People have been vaccinated against the flu and other diseases for decades.
Pandemic is new.
Medium-term effects of vaccines are minimal, if any at all. Again, the history of vaccines show this. And if you look at the short-term effects, yes, there have been individual cases of blood clotting and other diseases, but if you take a step back and look at the risks of something happening from COVID versus the risks of actually taking a vaccine, I think the risks of having COVID far outstrip and outweigh those of not being vaccinated. If I could just say personally, I had COVID. Unfortunately, I had COVID. It was a mild case. I'm fine. This was 1.5 months ago. No worries, I am safe. But what I did want to say is this, although I had mild cases, it's something that's scary and you do worry. And I do not wish this upon anybody. The first moment that I am eligible to get vaccinated, and then I will be vaccinated. Of course. And I would hope that others do the same.
Of course. In which case could 2021 be real recovery year for Georgia in terms of recovery and economic recovery, and also what could be the main growth drivers, so to say, going forward?
Okay. So, thank you for the question. First, I would like to acknowledge just how difficult this last year has been economically for Georgia. I mean, essentially, we've seen an economic contraction of 6.1%, which is quite substantial and larger than many other countries in the region. And it's a little surprise, given that Georgia is a small, open, liberal market economy that depends on tourism, right? We've seen the impact that this has had on the people of Georgia. Unemployment has risen from about 11% to 20.4%. Real wages have dropped by about 3%. We see that poverty has risen by 5.4%. Yes. The impact on firms, we see that 22% of firms have had to temporarily close, 3% permanently. And on the government, we see that the deficit is now at 9.7%. Public debt is at 62% to GDP. So
on the financial sector, we see restructured loans.
Well, yes, but so far I think the financial sector, thank God,
it's dealing.
Liquidity is there, and the National Bank is doing a very good job of overseeing and managing the financial sector. But to answer your question, Elena, I am confident that 2021 and beyond will be a year of recovery. In fact, our outlook is even a little bit more optimistic than that of the IMF, my colleagues from the IMF and the ADB. So we see already that the economy grew 4% in March compared to last year. And we also see positive trends in mobility, tax collection, energy consumption as well. And across April, the months of April and May, and all of this points to a robust recovery. So we essentially have a baseline scenario where we see 4% growth in 2021, and then towards the end of 2022, we see a return to growth pre-COVID levels of around 5% or so. However, there is, of course, a downside and an upside scenario. And these very much will depend on, number one, will there be subsequent waves of the pandemic? Will we see a third, a fourth, or even more waves? Second, the rollout of the vaccination efforts here in Georgia are going to be critical, in particular for tourism and making sure that that Georgia is an open country.
What will be the role of FDI, Mr. Molineus? And I'm asking this because we've seen Prime Minister appointing a special advisor on drawing FDI into Georgia, and that's Mr. Vasil Hudak, also your colleague, who used to be a vice president of the EIB. What's your take on that focus on FDI as well?
So I think it's important to focus on FDI, and in fact, Georgia has a good track record. If you look at the 10 years preceding the COVID crisis, we see that Georgia attracted about 7.5% of GDP on average, compared to an average of 3.5% across the ECA region. Now, the problem is that 75% of that FDI was in what I refer to as resource-seeking FDI, and not efficiency-seeking FDI. Yes. So we need to ensure that the FDI that's coming into this country is not only there for the extractives industries, but actually creates values, creates economic activity, creates jobs, and then helps export-enabling enterprise. And I think this is the key to what we need to get to. We actually did just briefly a survey on this and looking at what are the key success factors to making sure that Georgia can attract FDI. And there are three elements where I think Georgia is already doing very well: business environment, low taxes, as well as the market size, which is small, but because of the free trade agreements is actually much larger because you have access to different markets. But there are three areas in which Georgia needs to work on and that were cited as critical for investors: political stability, a skilled and motivated dynamic workforce, and then the physical infrastructure and logistics. And in particular logistics, I think Georgia still does relatively poorly compared to many other countries.
That's where I see the structural reform agenda needs to be targeted then. Thank you so much for being with us and taking our questions, and thank you and wish you success together with Georgia.
Thank you so much, Elena, for having me on the show.